Now, with the launch of Jungkook's latest campaign just hours away, public tension has reached a peak. Fashion insiders say this will be the great reset for Calvin Klein, the moment the brand truly seals its position as the pioneer of a new generation of fashion storytelling. From the limited leaks circulating, this time the campaign will no longer rely on a conventional sensual approach. No big spotlight, no glamorous staging. Instead, the production team chose a tone that was more cinematic, more intimate, and very Korean minimalism. Jungkook is portrayed not as a model, but as a human being in search of meaning. He walks through empty spaces, stares in the mirror, then writes something with trembling hands, a symbol of the journey of identity. This is not a fashion show, this is an emotional experience. And Calvin Klein knows full well, with Jungkook's visual appeal able to captivate the camera without a single word, the world will be talking about him for days. But the most interesting thing is the hidden message behind this campaign. Calvin Klein no longer borrows Jungkook's aura. It's a blueprint for the brand's future. Imagine, from a collaboration, now born a new global identity historic label. That's Jungkook's strength not because of his popularity, but because of his authenticity. In an era full of filters and gimmicks, such honesty is rare. And Calvin Klein, with all his experience, knows one thing. The future will not be won by the noisiest, but by the most honest. And so, when the countdown to the official release began, one simple phrase was spinning in the heads of all fans: Jungkook is not following Calvin Klein is following Jungkook. And that is the most shocking truth in fashion this year. There is nothing more exciting than how one move from Seoul could make the fashion industry in New York adjust its compass direction. But that's the Jungkook effect. When he appears, nothing remains the same. Before her collaboration with Calvin Klein, the relationship between K-pop culture and the global fashion world still felt like two worlds running parallel. The two glanced at each other, but rarely actually touched on a substantial level. However, from the moment Jungkook stepped into the first frame of the CK campaign in simple jeans, a white tank top, and a gaze that somehow felt both honest and sharp, all boundaries began to crumble. In just a few days, the New York Times wrote about the Jungkook effect, while Vogue US highlighted how K-pop aesthetic is redefining luxury minimalism. All the major publications have suddenly zeroed in on one name, not just because of its popularity, but because of the way it changed the visual sense of the fashion world. When Jungkook posed, that radiated not just product, but energy, an aura that mixes between serenity and rebellion, between beauty and imperfection. This is what led senior fashion photographers like Mert and Marcus to change their approach to photo shoots. Less direction, more spontaneous space. Jungkook was not directed, he was left to be himself. And it actually produces frames that are stunning, natural, and feel very human. Such authenticity rarely appears in the fashion world, which has been full of scripts and choreography. From there, a new trend in the industry was born: the raw, authentic campaign. Other brands started to copy, trying to bring honesty into their ads, but it's hard to match Jungkook's effect, because he doesn't pretend to be honest. He was honest. As he gazes into the camera, the world looks at someone who doesn't try to be perfect, but is captivated by her imperfections. This effect is not only felt in the Western fashion industry. In Seoul, Tokyo to Paris, young designers began to make Jungkook as a case study. It is touted as a representation of new masculinity, a form of manhood that is not harsh, not domineering, but remains strong in a gentle way. This is a revolutionary concept in the midst of visual culture that has been demanding perfection. Behind the scenes, Calvin Klein acknowledges that Jungkook's move has expanded their market into previously untouched segments. Southeast Asian teenage girls, the non-binary community, and consumers who buy not because of trends, but because of an emotional connection to Jungkook's figure. They don't buy clothes, they buy taste. So, it's no wonder that now every step of Jungkook, whether at the airport, at a public event, or in the studio, is followed by a global camera lens that wants to capture that same authentic aura. From Seoul to New York, the vibe continues to creep, and the fashion world knows. These are not just stars. It's a new center of gravity. For many, the word ambassador may mean simply a face on a billboard. But for Calvin Klein, Jungkook is more than that. He is the pivot of the system. That is, all strategic decisions, from the design concept, the direction of photography, even the selection of music in the promotional video, now revolve around it. At Calvin Klein's New York headquarters, the creative team even had an internal term, JK Energy. This is not a gimmick, but a working principle. Every new design element has to be tested. Does this have Jungkook's energy? Does it feel natural, genuine, not made up, but still classy? If the answer is no, then the idea is discarded. And because of that, you can feel a huge shift in Calvin Klein's entire product line since 2024, softer in tone, cleaner in lines, but with an emotional depth that's rare in commercial fashion. Indirectly, Jungkook has taught the fashion industry something they have forgotten about: taste. In the midst of high technology, artificial intelligence, and fast-paced design trends, Jungkook brings back the basic value of aesthetics. A human feeling. He became a reminder that fashion is not just clothes on the body, but a reflection of a person's soul. No wonder the Calvin Klein 2025 collection is rumored to take full inspiration from Jungkook's philosophy, from neutral but deep colors, soft but strong textures, to silhouettes that anyone can use without losing character. Even the way this campaign is distributed is no longer one-directional marketing. Calvin Klein is now implementing a two-way communication model, where the audience becomes part of the story's journey. They want fans to feel that this campaign is not about seeing Jungkook, but experiencing Jungkook. Behind it all, industry observers refer to this move as the Jungkook phenomenon. The phenomenon when the presence of a single figure is able to reimagine global corporate strategies, change the direction of brand communication, and even create new standards in global aesthetics. There is no more distance between brand and man. It all boils down to one big narrative of honesty, creativity, and emotional connection. And most amazingly, Jungkook did it without saying much. It is not necessary to explain who he is, the world already knows. It doesn't have to force people to like something. They will like it because they feel it. The new campaign, which will be released soon, is just the beginning of a new era for Calvin Klein. An era in which fashion is no longer just about the body, but about the soul behind the fabric. And in the midst of that big change, there was one figure who stood quietly, smiling, looking at the camera as if to say, "I'm not changing Calvin Klein. I'm just making it honest again." The world knows that's a sign that Jungkook is no longer just an ambassador. It is the pivot of a new global industry. What is interesting about all this is not only the visible changes, but how everything happens without noise. Jungkook never shouted about his achievements, never forced the narrative, "I am the center." But precisely because of this, its influence is felt more strongly. It's like a big wave coming in without a sound, but you know it's changing the shape of the beach. Such was the silent revolution he created at Calvin Klein. If in the past every major campaign of this brand was always launched with a grandiose press conference and an explosive tagline, now they have chosen the opposite path. Graceful silence. Jungkook's new campaign teaser is only a dozen seconds long. No narration, no slogans, just visuals, but the effect is like an explosion on the internet. Fans began to look for meaning in every detail. The light behind the window, the position of Jungkook's hands, the direction of his camera motion. And this is what sets Jungkook apart from other ambassadors. He doesn't just sell visuals, he provokes interpretation. People not only see, but feel. Not just watching, but contemplating. In every slow motion, there is something to be said but deliberately not said. The effect? Everyone creates their own story. And Calvin Klein knows it's the most effective marketing force in the digital age when audiences feel they own the narrative. In an internal note leaked to fashion media, the global CK team even referred to Jungkook as the quiet architect of emotion. They realize that the best way to dominate a conversation is not by shouting the loudest, but by creating space for others to speak. And Jungkook does that naturally. He didn't say who he was, but everyone knew him. It does not sell a product, but everyone wants to have a part of him. Even among senior fashion editors, a new term is emerging: the Jungkook silence marketing, an approach where visuals and emotions replace words. Many do not realize this strategy was born from Calvin Klein's observation of the way Jungkook communicates with the public. On social media, he can disappear for weeks, then come back with just one photo or video without a caption, and the world immediately noisy. A simple post like a coffee mug, a white t-shirt, or shabby shoes can make headlines around the world. Calvin Klein then adapted that formula into a global campaign system. Shut up, then surprise. There's not much to say, just one really Jungkook-esque moment, honest, spontaneous, and not made up. From here, they create an unpredictable release schedule, keeping the element of surprise alive at every launch. Because, as they learned from Jungkook, silence can also be the loudest language. No campaign is successful without a community, and in Jungkook's case, fans aren't just spectators, they're narrative machines. Calvin Klein realized this fact faster than any other brand. For years, fandoms were often thought of simply as emotional consumers. But in Jungkook's case, they were an organically organized cultural force. They don't just buy the product, they bring the product to life. Every time Calvin Klein releases a new photo, armies around the world instantly break it down into symbols, colors, tones, and even analyze Jungkook's hand gestures in search of hidden meanings. From here comes the phenomenon called fan-curated campaign, a process in which fans unofficially create layers of interpretation that enrich the brand's narrative. Calvin Klein doesn't fight this, they just facilitate it. In their internal deck 2025, there is a special chapter titled The Fan Ecosystem Theory, where it is explained how Jungkook's interactions with his community resulted in a continuous natural promotion cycle. Fans create content, build expectations, then create emotional value that eventually leads back to sales. But the effect goes far beyond numbers. They make Calvin Klein feel alive, human, and close. This is what makes Jungkook different from the old generation of ambassadors. He doesn't stand on stage with the spotlight, he walks with his audience, making them feel part of the journey. In this context, Jungkook is not only the face of Calvin Klein, but also a social narrator. He let the fans be the interpreters of his emotions. Every post, every behind-the-scenes moment fuels the fandom to create parallel narratives that spread faster than any ad. In fact, data shows that Jungkook's campaign engagement is 450% higher than other celebrity ambassadors at similar brands not because of advertising strategy, but because of community participation. Fans feel that they not only support their idol, but also take care of the meaning he creates. They are an extension of the idea of authentic connection, which has been the foundation of Jungkook. And for Calvin Klein, it's like discovering an infinite source of energy, an audience that willingly promotes the brand without being paid because they feel emotionally involved. In the modern marketing world, there is no greater power than that. Because when a sense of belonging is already formed, loyalty cannot be bought, it can only be felt. Jungkook managed to build it silently, honestly, and with heart. If you think that this campaign is just about a new collection, you are deeply mistaken. Behind the scenes, it's part of Calvin Klein's long-term roadmap for the next 5 years, and it all pivots on the Jungkook model. The concept was developed by their global strategy team, who believe that the future of brands is no longer in the hands of conventional models, but in the hands of cross-cutting cultural icons. Jungkook is not just a singer, not just a public face, but a symbol of a cultural transition from Asia to the West, from exclusive fashion to emotional fashion. Calvin Klein plans to make this approach their new formula in entering the market of Generation Z and Alpha generations more interested in the value of sincerity and representation rather than banal luxury. They know, with Jungkook in front, the brand image can adapt without losing prestige. Analysts' predictions suggest that this collaboration will be a milestone, like when Nike partnered with Michael Jordan in the 80 seconds. But a modern, more digital, more global, and more emotional version. Imagine, from a Korean singer who started her career in a small rehearsal room in Busan, Jungkook now plays a role that sets the direction of the world's fashion industry. Ironically, none of this was ever his intention. He just wants to express himself honestly. But in a world hungry for honesty, honesty itself becomes a magnet. And Calvin Klein knew that if they wanted to survive in the midst of this generational shift, they had to blend in with the values Jungkook brought. Authenticity, humility, and an aesthetic that doesn't try to please anyone, but still can't be forgotten. Therefore, observers call the launch of the campaign, this time not as a release, but as a declaration of the era. An era in which Jungkook not only redefines global brands, but also proves that the influence of Korean culture is not just a seasonal trend, it is the new language of the world. And between the glare of the lights, the denim wrapped around his waist, and that silent but deep look in his eyes, Calvin Klein rediscovered the most basic meaning of fashion, the truth that doesn't need words.